Hi folks, I'm Griffin Lucier. I am here starting up the YouTube channel again for the first time in a long time. In the meantime, since my last video, where I was probably playing Modern or Standard about a year ago or more, I have been doing some work on my blog at jundlife.blogspot.com, and I've been working on my Twitch channel, amongst other, life things. But for most of that time, I've been working on like this deck specifically. This has been a project that I started, I started when it was in Standard, and basically I've been playing this deck for the entirety of the historic format, and it's seen a lot of different iterations, a lot of different cards in and out, and it's kind of an amorphous kind of deck list where constantly there's no like combo, there's no cards that are just so good that they're in it, or cards that are the main focus. The main focus is that it is just a basic mid-range strategy that is tuned to try to beat what's going on in the metagame at any given time, and so plays a lot of cards that are like, nothing is like very bad, but a lot of cards that are, I guess, maybe you might not see other decks in the historic format. So let me run down real quick what's going on here. It's very self-explanatory. It's just straight mid-range deck with some cheap creatures that can kind of gain us value later in the game. Some 3-mana creatures and spells that are just trying to be a little flexible. Do whatever you need them to do in whatever matchup you need. Some cards, some planeswalkers here, and the top of our curve is trying to take over the game, try to gain some traction and run away with it, gain a little bit of advantage. And some cheap removal and some Thoughtseizes, along with pretty good mana base for having 3 colors and 3 copies of Castle Lockplane, which really helps us out in matchups where we're going long. The sideboard is pretty simple. Some Abrades and Disfigures for cheap creatures, and Grath and Phyrexian Arena and Duress. Those all come in against any kind of matchup where it's a card advantage battle, whether that's like Sultai or Blue-White Control or any kind of like mirror match-ish type situation. Finale of Eternity is another card that's pretty good against Creature Swarm kind of decks. And then Grafdigger's Cage is just a must-have. It's really fantastic in this format. It's really like one of the only super good dedicated hate cards in the format, and it also just happens to hit like a lot of the problem cards, like Kroxa, Uro, Dreadhorde Arcanist, Emry, Collected Company, like Bolus of Citadel, Woe Strider, Cauldron Familiar. Just like if it's shenanigans, then it gets hit by Grafdigger's Cage. It was really great to have. And then I like to play a couple of copies of By Force, which is kind of a luxury, but every once in a while you run into the colorless artifact deck or the Paradox Engine deck, and By Force turns out to be very good in those matchups. But it's like I say, it's kind of a luxury because the colorless artifact deck is pretty rare. That you'll see it, but when you do, By Force is just very, very good there. But it does have some applications other places too. So that's the list. I ran through 4 games on the ladder with this, and so what I'm doing is I recorded some games already. I actually recorded them a few days ago, but recorded some games already. I'm going to kind of go over what I'm doing in the games after the fact, kind of mixing it up a little bit so I'm not like talking and playing at the same time. I can kind of just explain what's going on and, you know, maybe like why cards are included, yada yada. So yeah, let's get to the games. Alright, so here we go. This is our first round here. So this is a hand that is okay. Red mana would have been way better. Or if we had had red mana, we would have been, you know, much happier. But I think, like, I don't mind keeping a hand that's got no red mana as long as it doesn't have red spells. You know what I mean? And the same is true with green. Black mana you kind of need. But, like, if you don't have any... a lot of things have to go wrong for it to be too terrible for you. I thought these away the Hydroid Krasis there. I don't know if that was right or wrong. But Yasharn isn't like especially dangerous because we had the Bloodchief's Thirst. And Uro, like, you still want to take the best card that they have, even if it's like, oh man, I wish, you know, I'll take this card now and then I'll take their second best card next or whatever. You can't do it in the reverse order, because what if they draw something that's, you know, better, and all of a sudden, like, you left them with the best card of that first Thoughtseize. I don't know if anything I just said makes any sense, but so we're able to take that Uro. The thing about taking Uro is it's a little. Let me pause for a second. We took Uro with Thoughtseize. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but I actually like taking Uro with Thoughtseize a lot. Because most of the time when I Thoughtseize somebody and they have a growth spiral, I'll take it. And so Uro is, you know, for the most part, pretty much the same card. And it costs them more mana, which is like, you know, you want them to spend more mana for sure. But you also don't want them drawing cards and making land drops, because then all of a sudden you're getting behind, you know, behind their Nissas, behind their Hydroid Krasises, and you don't want them to, like, that Uro is getting into the graveyard anyway, right? So it doesn't seem like it's that valuable to put Uro into the graveyard. But I think, like, I would, if they had a copy of 3 mana Explore in their hand, I think I would take that, right? So it's just like, sometimes you want to do it. Other times it's like, if they cast this thing, it's kind of like a waste of their mana. So you want to leave it in their hand, or they have something better. But yeah, I just don't want them to draw more cards. Every time they draw a card, they're also drawing something that's going to go into their graveyard, so they're getting one step closer to escaping the Uro. Depends on what they've got going on, but I feel like I see a lot of people not taking Uro with their Thoughtseizes when they should. And so here's a Bonecrusher Giant that's just like the shock, the stomp, the 2 mana, 2 damage is just really not that useful here. But what is useful is having a clock, having something on the board. And keeping your opponent kind of on the back foot. So here it's like, okay, well, my opponent would have rather waited around to try and play a Krasis when they had more mana, but here it's like they got to do something. So we drew Scavenging Ooze, which was just about the best thing we could have drawn, and here comes that Ooze, and we're gonna snag the Uro. Extinction Event is a tough card for this deck. We have a lot of 2 mana creatures, and so lots of times they're going to be getting 2 for 1 for their Extinction Events. Luckily, one of our creatures here was a Bonecrusher Giant, but I think in the future like trying to play around Extinction Event is a good idea, although I feel like less people are playing that card than normal. So I'm going to leave them with 2 Tails Ends in their hand. Clearly, you know, they don't have white mana for Yasharn yet, but I mean, they might get it pretty soon here or whatever. You never know. And so now it's just us and these Castle Locthwains against their Tails Ends, which is why I like Castle Locthwain a lot. If you get into these situations where both decks are top decking, you would much rather be the person with Uro and Hydroid Krasis and Nissa and Shark Typhoon, yada yada, Doom Whisperer. So in order to try to counteract that, Castle Locthwain gets us just more looks at cards. So I've drawn a few nice ones here, Vraska and Cheville. Both kind of protect us a little bit from what they could top deck. And they also both are just like pretty good threats. I mean, they're going to have to get these off the table if they want to win. Note that, like, a little while ago there, our opponent used Tails End to counter a Castle Locthwain, which is like, you know, that's great. That's card advantage. So I'm going to play the Ooze here. Opening ourselves up to Extinction Event a little bit, but not really, because we have this extra copy of Cheville in our hand that's not doing anything. So if they were to Extinction Event on 2, then like it would open us up to be able to play the other Cheville. Instead, they Thoughtseize it away, which is an interesting play. Makes me think that they're trying to like top deck Extinction Event. Or, yeah, if they're trying to top deck Extinction Event, then it would be good here, but I think I actually have lethal here? Yeah. So that game went really well. I think, you know, one thing here is that, I'll talk about sideboarding in a second, but one thing that's clear here is that, like, you definitely want an effect that can get an Uro out of a graveyard. Like, they are going to, first of all, they have a lot of cycling lands and growth spirals, so the amount of times that they hit Uro is pretty high, and so you're gonna have to face it. And they were able to Thoughtseize the Scavenging Ooze out of our opener, but we drew a second one. So I have 6 cards in the deck that are able to snag an Uro out of their graveyard, which I think is very useful. You really want to be able to top deck that if you can. There are also other cards that are good at dealing with Uro too. We don't have like hardly. Well, we have I guess Bonecrusher Giant and Chandra that are cards that can that are like removal spells that can't actually kill an Uro, but they kind of do other things. We don't have a lot of. We try to have our removal hit an Uro if need be between Vraska, Inscription, Maelstrom Pulse, Bloodchief Source. But Inscription is specifically good because it makes it so that if they Thoughtseize Scavenging Ooze, you have more shots at it later on. And then in the super late game, like Inscription of Ruin, all of a sudden, like with Inscription of Ruin in your deck, you basically have the best top deck. Once you get up to, you know, both players have like 8 mana in play, and you're trying to, you know, draw something useful after everybody's traded their cards off. If you draw Inscription of Ruin and you get to like nail an Uro in their hand and get back an Ooze and you eat the Uro, it's like a whole thing. So So Inscription basically gets to count as like another answer to Uro. So it's kind of like we have 8 answers to Uro in the main deck. What I usually do for sideboarding is cut. Well, I like to bring in Angrath, 2 Duress, and the 1 Phyrexian Arena. Angrath's a card I really like. Phyrexian Arena I'm kind of on the fence about, but it is pretty good when it works out. And then I will trim on Bloodchief's Thirst, Cheville, the Bone Crusher Giant, and then what else did I take out here? Looks like I'm down to 2 Bloodchief Thirst and Kata Shatterskull Smashing. I like to leave in Kazandu Mammoth in this matchup because the amount of green mana that you have is very important. In matchups where Scavenging Ooze is like really good and you really want to hit their graveyard, I try to leave in Kazandu Mammoth to make sure I have enough green sources to get lots of activations per turn. But that said, Shatterskull Smashing I can cut. There's not a lot of instances where you're gonna like use a Shatterskull Smashing to like get 2-for-1s because they don't have very many small creatures, and I kind of want to get like a little lower on land count. You need to have a lot of action to win this matchup. This is why right here. One of the things that we have as an advantage over Sultai is that Sultai, or 4-color midrange, they usually play 28 lands, which sounds like a lot, except they have 4 copies of Uro and 4 copies of Growth Spiral. So they get to thin their deck pretty well, and they want to draw those lands. Also, they're playing... this deck, it looks like, is playing 4 of each of the Sultai and Abzan Triomes. But lots of times they'll play Fetid Pools as well. So they have a lot of cycling lands too. I've been seeing a lot of people playing Castle Locthwain out of Sultai, which is kind of I don't know if it's a new addition, but I've been seeing more and more of it. Like maybe there's multiples and stuff in people's lists, which is tough because it doesn't help get an Uro into play. But anyway, we want to have fewer lands. So our cards are like, you know, for the most part, less powerful cards than Sultai has. But we get to have just a higher density of spells in the deck. So the top of our deck is going to just be a little bit more live than theirs. So our opponent has a pretty good hand here, and I have decided that what I want to do is try to keep this Cheville on the table. They're going to draw a bunch of cards between Uro. Yasharn is basically a 4-mana, 4/4 Mold Drifter when what you want to be doing is drawing lands. So that's going to be really good no matter what happens. But they're going to be drawing cards and putting some big threats on the table. I'm hoping to just have this Cheville around so that I can gain value out of my removal spells. Getting a little bit flooded here. This Maelstrom Pulse is pretty important. That being said, like, we are quite a few cards deeper than we otherwise would have been because of our cycling lands. So those have come up really big here. Yeah, so here's the Uro. And, like, Maelstrom Pulsing an Uro isn't very good most of the time. Like, that's, like, not a play you really want to be making too often. But with Cheville in play, it really makes it a lot more palatable. So we get to draw Angrath, which is awesome. So they're going right after Yasharn here, which is an interesting play, but it lets them have 3 mana available so that they can play the other Uro out of their hand. I guess it's interesting because, like, Doom Whisperer looks pretty good here, right? But they went with Yasharn instead. So that gives us a chance to put down Angrath, and you know the best use of Angrath clearly is just stealing an Uro and attacking with it and sacrificing it, getting a card, 3 life, dealing a bunch of damage. But just like having an Angrath on the table that's like protected, it's really strong. In this matchup, like I feel like if you can untap with Angrath in play, then you're really doing pretty well. So Inscription's a great draw here. Looking back, I think this is actually like a pretty easy play, but I didn't. When you have like this much mana and an Inscription, you're just like, oh man, what's like the biggest, most value thing I could do right now? But I do end up kind of coming up with a nice plan here. Which is to Inscription back a Scavenging Ooze, make them discard their Doom Whisperer, and just having like a gigantic creature in play. Almost got by the auto tap there, but I don't think it would have been too big of a deal. Here's an Uro. Just check the graveyard. One trick you got to do with Scavenging Ooze is that, like, you can, if they have 5 cards in their graveyard and cast an Uro, by the time it's in there, you can't respond with Scavenging Ooze to get rid of that Uro before they have the chance to escape all of those cards away and cast the Uro, right? So what you got to do, I mean, in this case was fine because they only had like 3 cards in the graveyard, but what you have to do is, like, in that situation, try to make it so they don't have 5 cards right away. So when that sacrifice trigger happens on Uro, they have to do something to try to get it so that there are more cards in their graveyard, and then you can try to hit the Uro out of there. So here's Uro. It's funny, you can kind of tell when they've drawn a land, because like that trigger will just like kind of stay on the stack. So we got that one. It was a fine match. I wouldn't say it was like a great showing. Like Sultai is capable of a lot more dangerous hands than that, and we were like pretty fortunate to keep Uro from escaping too many times. That said, that's kind of what we're set up for. Yeah, let's go to the second game. All right, here we go for the second round. Opener, not great, but it's close. We have all of our colors and a cycling land. This one's much better though. As for what to put back, it's kind of close, but so it looks like our opponent is on Sultai again. And so this is like a that's not a play that I love doing, but I want to get something on the table here. We're just not really doing anything else, and I don't know. Maybe in this position is actually wrong, but I feel like there are some times where you just have to be like, okay, you know, I know the Scavenging Ooze is really good against Uro if they have it. If they have removal into Uro and they kill my Ooze and then they get me with Uro later on, and they're like, okay, that's kind of going to happen. But we're behind the 8-ball because we've mulliganed. We don't want to get just like run out of the gym. We want to be able to cast our stuff. So I decided to play it. You know, we're going to be a little results oriented here with with our assessment probably, but and what ends up happening in this game. But you can see, like, it's tough sometimes when you don't have a lot of threats against this deck. Didn't have Thoughtseize, didn't have, you know, don't have a Planeswalker or second creature. So we kind of just have to hope this Ooze does a little bit of work, but they're not just going to play Uro into an active Scavenging Ooze. I decided not to attack there because I was worried about Shark Typhoon. Getting your Ooze hit by a removal spell is bad, but getting your Ooze hit by, like, them cycling a Shark Typhoon is just like a disaster, so decided not to go for it there. I mean, 2 damage isn't really gonna make or break this game. So there we see our opponent pretty aggressively using Castle Lochthwain. When they have Castle Lochthwain, it's really good for them. Like I say, I think they play fewer of them than we do, and then here's a case where Castle Lochthwain is kind of coming up to hurt them here. A second copy, whereas they would be able to escape an Uro. I think Ashiok was an interesting one here. Most people are playing Doom Whisperer in their in their flex slots for Sultai threats. I mean, there's Doom Whisperer, there's like extra Crasises. Everybody plays the 4 Nissa, 4 Uro, and usually 2 Crasis, but there's, you know, Doom Whisperer, extra Uro, or extra Crasises, Shark Typhoons. They all kind of have their pros and cons. I'm not really surprised to see any of them. Get to play Mammoth here, which is like, you know, not spectacular, but at least we were able to do 2 things with our mana there. Yeah, like I was saying, their Castle Lochthwains are usually better than ours just because they have more mana. When we draw a card off of a Castle Lochthwain, it's pretty likely that we're not going to be able to cast it the same turn, but unlike that, a Sultai player might be able to. So here's a Nissa, and things are looking bad. Not sure how we're getting out of this one, so I probably just conceded here. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. It was option B. It was either Chandra or concede. We just didn't have time to get rid of everything there. So we're going with the same sideboard plan, looks like. Maybe I changed it up. Maybe I'm cutting one Branch Walker and leaving in 3 Bloodchief's Thirst. I don't really know why you would or wouldn't. Maybe because I was a little afraid of Ashiok. When I'm afraid of Planeswalkers, I want to leave in my removal. But Yasharn isn't quite like that. This ends another mulligan. And then this one's just okay. Clearly needs a lot of stuff to go right. But we do have a 2-drop creature, and we have a Planeswalker, so it could certainly be a lot worse. So I made this play because I could draw Thoughtseize. Clearly we did not, but that's the reason behind playing the Rootbound Crag and then cycling. The other option would have been cycle first, then make a land drop to save 3 life off of Shatter Skull Smashing. I don't know, I was trying to get lucky, basically. Felt like we needed something to go right here for us. Time is definitely on the Sultai player's side if you're not, you know, doing something. It's a tough matchup because, like, looks like, you know, here we've got 2 Maelstrom Pulses and a Bloodchief's Thirst, which would be great against a lot of decks, but against Sultai specifically, it's like, you know, Uro is going to come back from the graveyard. Hydroid Krasis drew them cards. You're not getting good value out of, you know, trying to kill a Nissa because they've got lands that are now elementals and stuff. So it's like, these removal spells, they're not the best, but the other thing is that, like, you can't not have them. You can't be like, okay, they're going to play a Nissa, and I'm going to try and, like, just race it or something. So that, like, doesn't really work that well either. So you want them in the deck, but if you draw too many of them and not enough threats, then it's kind of bad. Mostly this is just a problem of having mulligan. But it is a tough matchup. We have a lot of things going well for us as far as, like, how the deck is built, but just intrinsically, if you're playing, like, bigger stuff and have more mana, then you're going to be better off most of the time. So we could claw back in here if we drew a Scavenging Ooze, maybe. The other thing is that, like, I don't love getting them to have, you know, more cards in their hand. Or, sorry, cards in their graveyard, you know. When it's like, okay, I need to wait around until I find an answer to Uro, and hopefully they don't get up to enough cards to escape their Uros. Until then, it's like, kind of a tough one. But let me try this. The idea there was I wanted to do that main phase to try to find an ooze, cast the ooze, get it Aether Gusted, draw it again next turn. Like, I definitely needed. Yeah, so here we go, and now how does this work out? If I cast this ooze, they're going to Aether Gust it, right? So I can't do it anymore, because then they'll go up to 6 cards. in their graveyard. 6 total cards in their graveyard so that they could Uro. The turn before that, I wanted to get the Ooze and wanted to try to draw an Ooze off of the Lock Twain so I could play it. They would either gust it, I would draw it next turn. But with the gust here, we're in pretty rough shape. I think I actually made a mistake here with my mana tap. Is that what's going on here? Yeah, it looks like it. So we're gonna gust the pulse. I have enough mana to cast the Ooze, but not enough mana to Bloodchief's Thirst. But we can get rid of all these Uros, and then kind of hope that they don't have any you know, I think I made a mistake there. I think I might have been right to Bloodchief's Thirst. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. They had a lot of stuff going on there at the end. So that's kind of an example of what can go wrong. Clearly, you know, you don't want to mulligan, but the problem wasn't necessarily that we were down a card. The problem was that we didn't find a hand that had a lot of pressure, and we weren't able to, you know, play a 2-drop and protect it, or play enough 2-drops that we got around their fatal pushes. And so they were able to spend their mana on their threats that are really good. That said, like, yeah, if you can go, you know, have a pretty good game against Sultai, then you're going to be doing okay. I think it's a pretty good matchup. I usually do okay against it. But yeah, you need the right things to happen as far as drawing. You know, it's not like a draw the right half of your deck, the wrong half of your deck. They're all useful cards, but you kind of need them at the right time. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong because their deck is just so powerful. So that's about it against Sultai. I think the other two matchups are against different decks. So let's check those out. Alright, so let's jump into our third match here. Yep. Fine hand. A little slow. No 1-mana spells, but totally reasonable. What I like about this hand is that it gives us a lot of options. We have a 2-mana threat, but we also have like a hate card against graveyard decks. We have Inscription of Ruin, which is a removal spell for a creature, but it's also a discard spell if we're in like a control matchup. And we have Chandra, which is kind of similar. It's like a card draw spell or a removal spell. And we have Mammoth, which is either a land or a creature. And we have Canyon Slough, which is either a land or a new card. So it's just like we have a lot of options, and what they play is going to determine a lot of different things, what we do with this hand. But it's like, I just like that it doesn't, you know, it doesn't just go A, B, C, D, like, okay, I'm going to play my 1-drop, my 2-drop, and my 3-drop, and my 4-drop, and if they can beat it then I lose. It's, we have a lot of options here. So I even started with the Kazandu Valley first, and the reason is Scavenging Ooze is definitely at its best when you have lots of green mana. And it looks like, you know, pretty much against no matter what we're up against, a turn 3 Inscription of Ruin is going to be pretty solid. So we have a good 3-mana play lined up anyway. So we're up against goblins. So Goblins is a matchup that's like dangerous, but they're also like kind of clunky. It's a strange deck, and for a deck that's just like so simple, it's like 36 creatures and a bunch of mountains. It's also just like strangely hard to attack. But they have the ability to play a Muxus next turn if they just have any land. So inscriptioning their hand would clearly be better than spending 3 mana to kill a 1 mana creature, but kind of got to do what you got to do to make sure that they don't have Muxus. So, this is a tough choice, though. They're only on 4 mana. So, this is kind of close, and looking back, this could be wrong. Like, it's possible I was supposed to just hit the Goblin Chieftain, but what's nice is that we have a removal spell for the Chieftain lined up, which is Chandra. So, I don't love leaving this Chieftain around, but I was trying to make it so that they couldn't get a Muxus down. However, they drew Phyrexian Tower. Or they had it in their hand, I don't know. I don't know, but... So they probably just cast Muxus here, if they have it. Yep, and they do. They revealed Ironcrag Feat, which is like... doesn't make a huge difference for us. Like, I think that it's a fair game to try and keep them away from 6 mana if you possibly can, right? Be like, okay, I don't want them to have Skirk Prospector in play. Don't want them to have Goblin Chieftain or Goblin War Chief in play, so that they don't get up to 6 mana and cast a Muxus. But with Ironcrag Feat in the deck, it's like if they put together 2 cards of Ironcrag Feat and Muxus, then it's like, okay, like there's not. It's really hard to keep them off of 4 mana. The other thing about the Inscription Ruin play there is that you really want to keep their haste creatures off the board if at all possible, because that's when, like, it's not that hard to, well, it's hard to beat a Muxus when they don't have haste, but you can do it. But when Muxus hits a haste creature, then you're pretty much done for. So giving them that haste creature, like leaving that haste creature on the table and then they play Muxus, makes it so that, they're gonna have that effect in play no matter what. So Board and all the removal and Grafdigger's Cage. Grafdigger's Cage is not like the greatest thing ever, but it's good enough. And we have some of our like 3 mana cards that aren't super spectacular here, like Clothis, the Dinosaur. I even usually trim on Thoughtseize, which is a little counterintuitive because Thoughtseize deals with Muxus, right? But we're going to be boarding in Grafdigger's Cage every time. So if that's the case, then Thoughtseize really isn't that good unless it's hitting Muxus, because what you're trying to do is get into a top deck war which makes Thoughtseize a lot worse. This hand is reasonable. The mana's kind of wonky. And Grafdigger's Cage is, like, good. The problem with Grafdigger's Cage is that their best answer to it is, like, lots of times people will board in a Braid. We have 3 targets that all get killed by a Braid. But the other option for beating Grafdigger's Cage is Goblin Trashmaster, which hits 2 of them just about as easily as it hits 1. So having multiples on that card isn't that great. Unlike other matchups where, like, I don't know, like Rakdos Arcanist basically folds to a Grafdigger's Cage, so they play lots of answers to it. But, like, but because they play so many answers to it, 2 Grafdigger's Cage is, like, really good, and all 3 Grafdigger's Cage is just, like, super lights out. So here, I mean, they all do the same thing, right? So it's not like you're getting any extra value. They are pretty good, though. Like, especially when you have Cheville in play. If you're able to just, like, play a fair fight against a Goblins deck, and they have... and you have Cheville, and they don't, we're just kind of, like, off to the races. So we nuke that guy. Try not to attack with Cheville. No point in... they have, like, all these 3 mana, 2/2 haste creatures. No point in trading 1 damage so that they can get us 2 damage. So here's a Matron. So they go and get Muxus, which is, like, a little scary because they only have 3 lands in play, right? So, like, what does that mean? It probably means that they have, like, maybe it means they have Ironcrag Feet. Maybe it means that they have, Skirk Prospector. I don't know. But, yeah, it was a little interesting. Either way, we kind of get paid off by holding on to that Grafdigger's Cage until they used their Matron and then got a pretty useless card out of it. Not that I, like, planned on that, but it seemed to work out. Alright, this figure's a good draw here because we want to kill... well, we want to kill everything, but I want to kill this Matron. The thing is, I don't love leaving a chieftain around, but I also, I mean, you want to have this, like, flow of removal spells going where you draw 1 off your Cheville, you use it, you draw 1 off your Cheville, you use it. So it's certainly better off for us to wait until the next turn, if we can, but giving them an opportunity to have a chieftain in play is, like, pretty dangerous. So we decided, like I said, I recorded these matches a couple of days ago, so I kind of forget what I did in every single turn or whatever, but decided to not pulse there, get the second cage down. So that's going to protect us from, well, it doesn't really protect us from Trashmaster, it protects us from a Braid. It leaves us pretty wide open to a Krenko there, but it's still like, you know, we're going to be getting cards off of the removal spell, so... Opponent decided to scoop. So we're going to game 3 against Goblins. The post-board games are better than the pre-board games, right? They're kind of just... That's going to be the case in almost every matchup with a deck like this. But being on the draw hurts us a little bit. Goblins isn't super fast, but every once in a while they do have a hand that can kind of overrun you. This is a little bit of a sketchy hand. So the reason I decided to mulligan there is that the value of a mulligan goes up a lot when you have cards in your hand in your deck that are like really, really good. I heard like a long time ago, one of the members of the Peach Garden Oath was playing in a Legacy tournament and had a game where it was like game 2, and he was playing against Dredge in Legacy, and he played turn 2 Rest in Peace, and the opponent just immediately conceded the game. It was just like, I can't beat that card. So in game 3, this player is like looking at his hand and is just like, it was like a fine hand. It was like a perfectly keepable hand, but mulliganed anyway, because it was just like, well, if you have a card in your deck that just instantaneously wins the game for you, like the value of a hand without it goes like way down as far as like your hand, you know, deciding whether or not the mulligan goes, because like there's just no better card than 2 mana win the game, right? So when I was looking at that first hand, it's like, okay, this is like kind of reasonable. We have our colors, we have our removal spell, we have a creature, but we also have Cheville in the deck, and Cheville is like just about as close to lights out as you could possibly make any card for this matchup. So the opponent did have the Abrade there, which was really important for them. Because, I mean, otherwise we would have been like, okay, draw a card off that War Chief, draw a card off their next creature, off their next creature. Our hand is just all removal. That's kind of the perfect storm here against Goblins. It's just like Cheville and a million removal spells. So the option there of Chandra or Pulse plus Cage. Looking back, I'm not sure if I made the right choice, but when they have all of these cards that are, you know, be it War Chief or Goblin Chieftain, creatures that can attack, you know, creatures with haste, right? And so when Chandra comes down and deals with something, all of a sudden it's pretty vulnerable to haste creatures. It's one of the reasons why Planeswalkers aren't that great, but they are pretty good, like really good, I guess, in conjunction with Cheville, because Cheville blocks. But either way, like the likelihood that Chandra lives is not super high, because the other thing is that like they were stuck on 3 mana, so I feel like they're pretty likely to have a third copy of one of those 3 mana 2/2 hasters. So that being the case, it's like, well, I'll try to hit their next play. Hopefully they like miss on land again and play another creature. So this is the problem with that play. They're going to Goblin Matron, and they're going to find probably Goblin Trashmaster. So this is kind of a tough spot. Our opponent can play Muxus, but doesn't really do much. So then we got to figure out, like, what are we going to do? What are we doing with our turn here then? Play Bone Crusher and pass. Like, you know, they can get up to 6 mana, but Muxus is shut off by Cage. The fact that they went for Muxus makes me think that they probably have an answer, but they don't have enough mana to play the answer and the Muxus. So what we're going to do is just get as much stuff on the table as we can. Chandra's mana ability doesn't come up super often in this matchup, or I mean in this deck, but every once in a while you basically just get a 2-mana Planeswalker, which is pretty fantastic. That said, one of the things that I think would make this deck a little bit better is if... It just seems like most of the cards that I want to play with are not red, but having Magmatic Channeler as one of your 2-drops... I've talked about it a lot, that I'm, you know, never super satisfied with what we've got going on for 2-drops in this deck. After Cheville and Scavenging Ooze, it's like there are a bunch that are just kind of like equally good, it seems like, between Magmatic Channeler, Gifted Aetherborn, Gifted Aetherborn, Merfolk Branchwalker. There is Glint Sleeve Siphoner. And Magmatic Channeler is the thing that's the best about Magmatic Channeler is that it almost made a misclick there. The thing that's best about Magmatic Channeler is that you can cast it off of a Chandra, so it's basically 0 mana on turn 4. Finale of Eternity coming up big here. I really like this card. Just kind of like a better version of Shatter Skull Smashing. Although Shatter Skull Smashing would have been fine here too. It's another card that would have been really good, but you can like hit really big creatures. I've never done it for 10, but you can hit like 3 creatures. Something out of like a Gruul deck, and they have like a lot of 3 toughness stuff in play, like Gruul Spellbreakers and Bone Crusher Giants in play, and you just like X is 3, kill 3 of your creatures. All of a sudden, like the game just, it's not. You don't like win on the spot, but turns the tides pretty nicely for you. All right, so now the opponent's in the tank. And this is an interesting attack here. I don't know. Maybe because it's not that interesting. But I want to get that thing off the table. And I also want to protect Chandra's loyalty because we're getting up to ultimate range here. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to make... I remember this play pretty well. I'm going to make a pretty impressive punt here, but don't turn off the video because it's actually going to wind up just fine. So don't get nervous. We'll see what happens. It's actually kind of interesting. So I'm going to make attack here. If they block, then I disfigure, and they go to 5, and then any spell. And then I have the Bone Crusher still in play, and any spell wins the game. If they don't block, then I have them at 1, but that's not really that valuable. It's not like there's fetch lands or anything. I could kill the Krenko right now, because you really don't want to have Krenko untapped. But what's interesting is that like the worst, basically one of the worst case scenarios is that they have like another haste creature, Goblin Chieftain, Goblin War Chief. But this figure is going to hit just about everything that they can play this turn. And then I get to 2 for 1. I get to kill the creature. One, they go like, here's my creature. I'm going to tap Krenko, make 2 goblins. I get to kill both with the Disfigure, and plus the Chandra emblem. And also, just like the later I wait, the more like the better. The longer I wait, the more odds I have of just like drawing another spell and just being able to go bang bang, right? So they drew Phyrexian Tower, which is like the perfect thing for them. So what they're going to do is activate Krenko. And Big Brain Griffin decides, well, if I kill this Krenko right now, then I have to use both the emblem and the Disfigure to do it. But if I kill this Krenko right now, then the Krenko's ability will make 0 goblins. And then they can't sacrifice a goblin to get up to 6 mana to cast Muxus. All they had to do was sacrifice it with Phyrexian Tower, the Krenko itself, and then they could cast Muxus. But the opponent didn't see it either. I don't know if you're watching, you saw what happened there, saw the punt, be like, oh, don't do that. That's not the play. But the opponent didn't see it either. I guess that's one thing about Magic, is that like, you can play really bad, but there's always a chance your opponent bails you out. The problem here is that we're still at a point where we need 2 of either Bone Crusher Giant hitting them or a spell to deal 5 damage with the emblem. So we're not out of the woods. They're up to 6 mana. You're really never safe when the other player has Muxus in their deck. So opponent's at 2. And any spell here for 2 mana or less will win the game. The thing about Muxus is that, like, if they can kill you from 12, they can kill you from 10 just as easily. So it's like, it doesn't cost a lot to go for the Castle Locked Lane right there. Now it's just like, man, I really hope they don't have any haste creatures up the top. And they didn't. We got pretty fortunate there. But we still need to draw a spell. We didn't do anything, and we drew a spell and won the game. That being said, they actually had enough mana to play another Muxus. I don't know if they had one in their hand or not. But with the Prospector and the Wily Goblin token, they had 6 mana. Yeah, Chandra was pretty good there, but the reason the Chandra was good is because we had enough stuff going on. We just had enough removal spells to make it so that she was good. We were able to utilize the mana ability, I think, twice there, and keep pace with all their creatures and, haste creatures, and make it so they couldn't attack her at all. Goblins is pretty well positioned to try to fight Planeswalkers, so if you can get one to survive, you're doing pretty well. And all in all, I think that that's an okay matchup. You like clearly, you know, any deck with like Disdainful Stroke or something like that would be better against Muxus, but we do a pretty good job of fighting them. In the first game, you know, a Muxus in their hand is pretty hard to beat. We get the cages after the first game that lock them out, but just if the game comes down to like a fair fight between, you know, your spells and creatures against their creatures, then we're usually doing pretty well. We have a lot of card advantage rolled up. We have some creatures that are big and don't need a lot else going on, like Scavenging Ooze. And a lot of 2-for-1s, like Inscription and Chandra and Bone Crusher Giant. So I think that that's a pretty good matchup, again, and, you know, it's historic, so if you're doing well against Siltine and Goblins, then you're doing pretty well. I got one more match, so we'll get to it. Alright, one more. Pretty good hand. Thriving More, the one of, kind of coming in handy here. That's a card I'm certainly on the fence about. It's like pretty low power, but doing its job here. Irrigated Farmland over there. That means get comfy. I'm playing blue-white control. But we have a pretty good hand here. We've got like the right number of removal spells, which is 1. We've got Merfolk Branchwalker, which I think this is probably like the matchup where Merfolk Branchwalker excels as far as our 2-drop creatures go. And Chandra, you know, some good stuff going on. When we have such good cards in our hand, I'm not super concerned with trying to like play around Absorb. Absorb is going to kind of get us almost no matter what happens. You know, when I was casting this Thoughtseize, I remember thinking to myself, I think I'm in okay shape as long as they're not 2 Teferi's in their hand. But there were 2 Teferi's in their hand, so it was pretty bad. So this is kind of an interesting decision. We can play around Censor by using Bloodchief's Thirst. I don't remember what I ended up doing here. But it doesn't really play around Seal Away very well. Looks like they did not have Dovin's Veto or Seal Away. So I'm going to exile that Klothys. Like, I don't really care too much about like my life total, and I can kind of nuke those creatures in my own graveyard at my leisure, but we get to play around a Shark Typhoon or a Seal Away and get that Narset off the table if I put Ooze to a 3/3. And there is a little bit of value to making sure I can get the Narset actually all the way off the table instead of just at 1 sitting there. This might have been a mistake, actually. It's possible I was supposed to play the Chandra instead, and of course they draw the Narset to make it look even worse. But yeah, like if I had a Vraska right now, then I would have been in much better shape. If I had played Chandra last turn, and then this turn I would have my choice of Chandra or Vraska, because I knew it was getting countered by the Dovensvita. So this turn I could have played Vraska, hit the search with the -3, and then next turn see what they do, have the ability to play a Chandra. But instead now, I mean, it was pretty bad for them to, Nar sent it to search for Escanto was basically the worst case scenario this turn, of course, but like, I still just like gave myself fewer options than I otherwise would have. I also think I like playing the Mammoth, as Kazandu Valley here. I'm gonna want to have mana available to me so that I can play Chandras and tick up and do something with the cards that I hit. Unfortunately, like, opponent kind of has it all here, so don't remember. I think I just concede here. Once they get Teferi down and have like a couple of turns with it, it's pretty hard to win. So Duress is kind of it's what's I guess what I like about the way that the sideboard is set up. The Duresses, the Arena, and the Angraths, those are really good in this matchup. They're also pretty good in the Sultai matchup. I think I wouldn't want any more Duresses than 2 against Sultai, but they're fine there. And they're really good here. And so I like that we can, like, pretty much we can take out a lot of our bad cards against blue-white, which is, I think that's kind of, against something like blue-white control for a deck like this, it's not necessarily that, like, there are any specific cards that are good against them. It's just kind of like, because blue-white control decks can stop just about anything, right? They really put their mind to it. They can cast down a Phyrexian Arena. They can, play a Shark Typhoon and attack down your Planeswalkers. They can, play removal spells, whatever, counter spells. But the way that you end up losing a lot of the time and why Game 1 is so bad is that you have removal spells, you have these anti-creature spells in your hand of your own, and your anti-creature spells are terrible, and their anti-creature spells are fine. And so when you are able to take out your anti-creature spells, all of a sudden your deck just like fights this matchup way better. And so what's good here is that we have these a pretty large swath of cards in the sideboard that come in against Sultai, which I think is something that's like useful because Sultai is like so prominent. It's not just good, it's also like very popular. Play against it a lot, but all of those cards are also good here. And it seems like the blue-white matchup, as long as you can have enough total cards to bring in the matchup, then you're going to be fine. It doesn't matter if they are, an A+ card or a B+ card. in the matchup. It's just kind of more about having lots of them. Because they're able to, they're able to use counter spells and whatever to stop you on a 1-for-1 basis pretty much whenever they want to. So you just need, like, you can only expect a few of your cards to actually, like, work, do their job. And so you just have to have a high volume of quality spells. Here, the trick with Narset and Cheville is that you always, always, always have to put the counter on the Narset, because you will not be drawing a card if Narset is in play. I guess the only possible time that that's not true is if you were playing with Murderous Rider in your deck, and you Murderous Rider something on your opponent's turn, like I'm going to upkeep Murderous Rider your Teferi away or something. But pretty much every other time you have to put the counter on the Narset with Cheville and then draw a card. We had a few options there, and I was really hoping to draw a black source so that we could cast Inscription of Ruin. But we did not. We did, however, find a land now, which is going to be pretty good. So I think we probably just land a Chandra, or do we do some Inscription shenanigans? I don't remember. But we're set up kind of well against Teferi. I imagine that's why they played Baffling End on the Cheville. It's because they're going to try and play a Teferi here. So we have access to 7 mana, which means we could do a lot of cool stuff here. But instead, I guess I decided to use Chandra to tick up, or the first of her +1 abilities. Thoughtseize would have taken the Dovin's Veto, so that's great for us. Sometimes I'll, like, try to get my opponent to block my creature by attacking the Planeswalker, but I think it would have been really bad for me if they had decided to not block and just leave Teferi at 1 there. Depends on just kind of what's going on there. I thought the Omen of the Sea was an interesting inclusion in this deck because they don't have Yorion. So the reason I tick up here is because, like before I cast the Duress, is because I could hit Angrath. Opponent has a lot of lands. Teferi's always a pretty good draw, but they have to hit the Chandra, which means we can hit it with our Bone Crusher Giant. Now the question becomes, should we Maelstrom Pulse the Teferi and deal 4 upstairs? Yeah, maybe. The other option, though, is this Shatter Skull that we drew. We could hit the Teferi for 1. But the other part of this equation is that if we're just in a holding pattern and we have Castle Locthwain, like, we're doing fine. They are still on the back foot, and we have some card advantage going on. And with that Search for Skanta coming down, I'm really glad that we didn't decide to use the Maelstrom Pulse on the Teferi. And so here is part of Chandra's neat little ability. We basically get to cast her for 2 mana. So I'm definitely hitting that pulse. Like with the amount of mana that they have available to them, like I can't let them untap with that Search for Skanta. So here's a baffling end. A lot of different options here. Chandra to deal 2. Get rid of Narset. They have 1 draw step to try to find something to deal with the Chandra. Now they have a couple of scries. Now they have 3 more cards they could look at. Clearly didn't find it. We were looking pretty good there, though. Castle Locthwain is super helpful. Like, it just makes it so you're not afraid to go along there. You know, I think there are certain matchups. I guess not certain matchups. Certain decks where, like, you don't have any ability to, you know, play that long game like that. Like, I'm not worried in this matchup if the game goes for like a long time. I'm worried if they get a huge board position with Planeswalkers, but I'm not, like, if it gets to, you know, turn 30 and each of us have 12 cards in our library or something. That's like not that big of a deal. We can still hang. So this is a good hand because Arena is really good. The problem is Arena is at its best and kind of also at its worst in this matchup because it's so bad against Narset. But we have a lot of ability to keep Narset off the table, and Cheville actually does a really good job of keeping Narset on the table. You don't really want to be casting a Narset in the face of a Cheville. Kind of doesn't work out. They're gonna, but like, again, we're probably gonna be drawing cards here or something. But I can't play the Arena because then at the beginning of my upkeep I just lose a life and I don't draw an extra card. So my opponent uses that Narset immediately. Pretty interesting play. Because by -2ing there, we get the trigger off our Cheville. So I don't know if it was the right play or the wrong play, whatever. I mean, it's kind of impossible for us to know based on what's in their hand. But if they were thinking about playing Wrath of God, they really needed to do it before they minused that Narset. So having said that, we know they have an Absorb now. Don't really want to cast. Well, here's the thing. It's funny, right? I have a creature in play already. Why am I going to cast my huge creature into the face of this Wrath that I know they have? But the reason is we have Phyrexian Arena. And so if they Wrath there, like, I'm willing to pay some, or, you know, throw this Pelucranos away to get this on the table, to get the Phyrexian Arena on the table. So this duress is made a little tough because of that Elspeth Conqueror's death. I mean, ideally I would just take the Teferi, right? But we know they're gonna get it back. So I have to come up with some plan for trying to deal with the Teferi. In the meantime, I'm probably getting my Cheville killed, which is like, that means that I'm only 1-for-1ing the Teferi instead of getting a 2-for-1 out of it with Cheville when it actually comes back. Angrath's a pretty good draw. Thoughtseize does its job. And so we know Teferi is coming back. And we know they have the ability to Wrath on the same turn. They don't even have to tap the mana for Teferi. It's kind of amazing how good this Elspeth Conqueror's death is. We have 3 draw steps to find, like, a Duress or a Thoughtseize here between cycling our Canyon Slough, the Phyrexian Arena trigger, and a draw step. Because I feel like it's pretty likely that they have a counterspell here. You never know, though. Yeah, so finally they do use the Wrath on the Cheville 1-for-1. So now we're in pretty good shape here. Lots of answers to this Teferi. We didn't draw a Duress, but we drew a land plus a Maelstrom Pulse. So now it's like, well, what are we gonna, if they have a negate or another Dovin's Veto or something, what are we gonna do about it? So you just need to get Teferi off the table as soon as you can. And they didn't have counterspell last turn, so I mean, at a certain point, when you got Phyrexian Arena in play, and Castle Locthwain too, it's just like you have no reason to play around counterspells, because them just like spending their mana and cards on a 1-for-1 basis turns out to be good for you, not bad for you. So, like, I mean, Angrath resolving is better than it being countered for sure, but if they drew a counterspell, like, big deal. This play I'm actually not sure about. I wonder if I should have cast Duress instead. Because if this is a Shark Typhoon, it starts to look pretty bad. Whereas if I Duress and it's Shark Typhoon, it's great for us. We just steal the Shark and attack Teferi with it. So can I turn this thing into a 5/5 and hit this Teferi? I don't remember. I think I only had like 2 creatures in my graveyard or something. So here is a case where this happens pretty rarely. Yeah, I was not able to hit that Teferi. Happens pretty rarely, but we are kind of going to be able to effectively fight this Search for Azcanta with a Scavenging Ooze. But I usually don't play... Like, if I remember right, I think we went down to 2 copies of Scavenging Ooze after sideboard here. I think the Scavenging Ooze is pretty bad in this matchup. And it's because it's, like, not an effective card against Search for Azcanta. If it could deal like effectively with Search for Azcanta, then it'd be great, but it doesn't. So it's almost always just a 2/2 creature. But in this late game situation where it's like just, you know, kind of, I wouldn't say we have it locked up, but it's looking pretty good for us. This is the kind of situation where it's like we're able to do stuff like this. Not super thrilled or sure about any of the plays that I'm making here, but I think we're far enough ahead that I don't necessarily need to make the right decisions. I just need to close the game. But I think I can actually win this turn, depending on what's in their hand. We'll see. Can't win anymore. We actually had the win. If I wanted to get back Polukranos to 12/12, I untap it with Angrath and attack. But not necessary. So, what I was doing there is, I don't know if you see the line here. Our opponent is playing Authority of the Consuls. At any point I want to, I can. Oh, I guess I didn't have the win because you can absorb an escape spell. Anyway, the line here that I'm trying to do is bring back Polukranos, give it haste with Angrath, which also untaps it, and then attack for 12 with it. The problem is Authority of the Consuls puts them up to, it would, like right now, it would put them up to 13. It's not, like, you know, if we didn't have the Polukranos in our graveyard, I think we're still, like, 99% to win this game. You know, they could have Wrath or whatever, but I think we still kind of have it locked up. But if they give us an opportunity to attack for lethal, you should probably take it. All right. Opponent tapped out, no cards in hand. Feels pretty free to do this play. They go up to 13. We -3 on Lucanos. Cool. So that's kind of like how you can expect the matches to go against blue-white. It's like they have a significant advantage in game 1, and you have a pretty significant advantage in game 2. The problem is that you still just need to, like, Magic is still a game of chance, right? And you still just need to have keepable hands in games 2 and 3, functional hands, and sometimes you just don't have it. So that's why it continues to be a matchup that is not impossible, but certainly pretty hard, and at least hard to navigate sometimes too. All right, so to wrap it up, yeah, this is what the list looks like, of course, right now. Just want to talk real quick about Kaldheim. A lot of cool cards from Kaldheim, and if you take a look at my blog that I have links below for, you can see kind of an in-depth set of thoughts on all the cards that are interesting to us. There's a few more that have come out or have been previewed recently that also seem cool, like the red tapped land that has a green and red sacrifice ability. I don't know what it's called. But a lot of interesting stuff. A lot of stuff that's difficult to I guess decide if I think it's going to be good enough for the deck or not. And then also, what other cards are going to be in the format that we need to think about. Specifically, Faceless Haven looks like it's going to be really good, and we're going to have to kind of tune the deck to beat not necessarily Faceless Haven itself, but Faceless Haven decks. If that becomes a thing, and a lot of interesting stuff going on. I wonder if the new Wrath with Fortell, I think it's called like Scar. I don't know. It's called like Stellan Skarsgård, I think is what it's called. The guy from Mamma Mia. I think that will probably make Blue-White Control a little bit more popular as well. So we'll have to, of course, like every set and new deck that comes out, we got to take a look at this kind of list and reevaluate, and then check out some of Kaldheim's cards for us. I think the card I'm most interested in is Valky, which has Tybalt on the back. It's a dual face card. I think that card looks pretty strong. It's set up well to fight some things that are popular in the format right now, and it's just got a lot of different options. At worst, it's just a 2-mana creature, so you're not investing a lot. I like that card a lot. I like Sarulf. I like Battle Mammoth. I think that looks pretty good. I don't know if it's got a place in a deck like this, but I think it looks like a good card. And yeah, so this is kind of the starting point right here, and we will see what's going on. I think it's like 8 days away. In the meantime, I think this is a pretty good deck for grinding the ladder. I think what I like about this deck playing it on the ladder is that you aren't going to run into very many things that are just like atrocious matchups. You won't hit something like, well, I ran into Sultai twice in a row and lost a bunch of my rank, or I ran into a bunch of whatever was hot that day and lost a bunch of my rank. You can kind of beat everything. You can also kind of lose to everything. But, if you tune it to the right part of the metagame and just kind of anticipate what you think you're going to be seeing, then it does pretty good at climbing the ladder. It's not the fastest deck ever. It's not like I think I've seen people play like mono red and Gruul because they can get more games in and climb the ladder faster. You're not going to do that with this deck, but you'll get a pretty good win rate and stick with it, and you'll definitely reach Mythic with this. I've done it a few times now. If I should be able to do it more often now. It's been tough with work to put in the time. I really like where we're at, and I'm really excited for Kaldheim. Thank you very much for watching. Again, check out twitch.tv/GriffinLucier and jundlife.blogspot.com, where I talk about this deck and I talk about the Kaldheim spoilers. And yeah, really appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. Bye.